Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of The Talk Show. I'm your host, Raphael Liban, and we have another great lineup for you tonight with talented artists and thinkers, Ari Lesser and Rav Gav Friedman, local clean speech champions, Melanie Grunwald, Steve Brodsky, and our word-wise kid, Julie Vita. I'm also delighted to welcome back to the show my co-host, Adrian Gold Davis, who will be having a special conversation with our friend Lori Palatnik, formerly of Denver. This year's Clean Speech campaign is called The Price of Words. What we say can really cost us. Like $27 billion. Just a few weeks ago, Jack Ma, the wealthy founder and CEO of Alibaba, Chinese version of Amazon, was days away from seeing his company listed on the stock market in a record IPO when he chose to launch a blistering public attack on the country's financial watchdogs and banks. Senior Chinese regulatory officials were furious at Ma's criticism, describing the speech as a punch in their faces. Jack's speech set off a chain of events that ultimately torpedoed the deal 2 days before the eagerly awaited market debut in Shanghai and Hong Kong and cost Jack $27 billion. It's the price of words. Most of us won't ever have that much money. I can't even imagine how much that really is. But we all know that if we don't weigh our words carefully, we will suffer the consequences. Let's go now to our first guest, Melanie Grunwald, dear friend and local clean speech champion.
One of the examples of onat devarim that resonates for me is a prohibition against name-calling and putting labels on people. The Gemara teaches us that we should not embarrass another person publicly, nor should we refer to a friend by an embarrassing nickname. Even if the victim is used to the name and is not insulted by it, we may not use that nickname. For all of us, there are names that are given, like our names at birth. There are names that are acquired, like degrees or titles. There are names that are put on us, whether we accept them or not. All of these names become forces in our identity development, our personal narrative, and how we define ourselves. I often think about children who might be labeled as easygoing, artistic, challenging, a scientist, a reader, a musician, or so on. These labels become lenses with which others define us and with which we come to define ourselves. In Kabbalah, labels are part of our discussion on masks. We learn that there are masks that we are born with. There are masks people put on us. There are masks we choose for ourselves. Masks aren't meant to be pejorative, but rather part of the layers we carry in our day-to-day lives. We all have them, but we can also choose how we relate to them. This lesson of onat devarim reminds us when we engage in labeling, we are limiting, potentially embarrassing, and acting in destructive ways, even if the harm is unintentional. As we look inwards, we must also look outwards. As we raise awareness of the masks and labels that have been put on us, we must also be conscientious about how we use our language and avoid putting labels on others. My name is Melanie Grunwald, and I'm keeping it clean.
When I say clean speech, you should know I don't mean just avoiding those words that are seen as obscene, because if your conversation hurts another person, that's far worse than swearing, or cussing, or cursing. There's no way to rationalize those lies that lower your fellow in another guy's eyes, but even if you knew what you're saying is true, that's still no excuse for the damage you do. Mitzvot get broken by spoken word speak. Folks start joking like it's just tongue in cheek. You poke a little fun thinking that you're only kidding and you didn't even realize what you're doing is forbidden. But I won't stand by letting slander fly, because with each act of evil speech, 3 people die. See, in our tradition, you kill the one you're dissing in addition to yourself and any person who will listen. The position that you put me in is bad for my spirit, and I don't want to hear it or even be near it. Everyone knows how that old saying goes. If you can't say something nice, keep your mouth closed.
I'm delighted to introduce our next guest, direct from Jerusalem, a popular speaker and storyteller, and a several-time special guest here to Denver, Colorado, dear friend Rav Gav Friedman.
I'd like to share with all y'all an amazing story that I heard many a year ago. I believe it is timeless and very powerful. There's a fellow by the name of Ben Carson. Some of you might recognize the name. In any event, this fellow, this boy, Ben Carson, was a black boy growing up in Detroit, Michigan, and he really was not. He didn't really have much going for him. Unfortunately, life was pretty challenging. Lived in the inner city, and things didn't always go so easy. Let's say. Now, one day he decides he wants to be a doctor. Okay, he decides he wants to be a doctor. So he starts working on his math, starts working on his sciences, and he really does well. So finally gets to take the MCATs. MCATs are the entrance exam into medical school. He passes with true colors, flying colors, and he's so excited. He's so excited. He's going to realize his dream. He comes to class the very first day, and he was lucky enough to have a professor that was a racist. Now, I don't know where you're watching this. It may be in only Colorado, maybe all over the world, but I'll tell you one thing. At least in the United States, it's not something which is even legal to be openly a racist. But all right, what could you do? You find people that behave like this. And he didn't spare any time sharing this with little Ben, that he wasn't so fond of him being in the class. So the very first day, towards the middle of the day, he goes to him and he says to him, you know what? I don't know if this is really for you. Why don't you just go home? And he was crushed. He couldn't believe it. He's like, what is going on here? But he said, okay, listen, I guess, if I'm not wanted, I guess I'll go. But he says, you know what? I want to make sure that I'm not embarrassed. Let me wait till the end of the day. So he says, okay, if that's what you have to do. He waits till the end of the day. He's walking home. He's feeling down. He's feeling dejected. He's feeling really bad about himself. And as he gets towards his house, he sees his mother come out of the house. And his mother says to him, son, you are the greatest. And he was like, what are you talking? Me? She goes, you're the greatest. You're going to get us out of here. Moving on up to the east side, The whole choir popped out. He said, you're going to bring us out. You're going to be a success story. And he goes, yeah, I am the greatest. Yeah. So he goes back the next day. And the professor goes, what are you doing here? You're a nothing. He goes home feeling down. When he gets home, his mother comes outside. She's holding an apple pie and goes, son, here's some apple pie. And you are the greatest. He goes, I love apple pie. I am the greatest. The next day he goes back and the professor goes and says, you're a nothing. Goes back home. You're the greatest. You're a nothing. You're the greatest. You're a nothing. You're the greatest. So he develops a condition. He sees a doctor. He gets it fixed. He pushes his way through that year. He pushes his way through it painfully. He pushes his way through and he finishes. And he's done with that professor. Whew, thank God he's done with him. And he moves on year after year till finally he graduates from medical school. He's going to be a doctor. And it only takes him 12 years. Now, for those who are familiar with the medical system, you would know 12 years. Maybe the professor was right. Maybe he should have taken a different job. What took him 12 years to finish? See, the answer is that Dr. Ben Carson went on to become what's known as a pediatric neurosurgeon. For those who are unfamiliar with what that means, it means a child brain doctor. If you're still unfamiliar with what that means, I could refer you to someone. And he went on to become actually very famous. He was the first one in the United States, at least maybe in others as well, I don't know, to separate Siamese twins from the head. Unbelievable. And he went on to write a book. That's where you make the real cash. He went on to write a book. I believe the book is called The Gifted Hand. And he went on in that book to describe one thing. He wrote one thing in that book. So he wrote another book with more things. But he had one message that he wanted to get across. And he said, there's one person that I have to thank. And that person saved my life, and that's my mama. Because my mother said one thing that saved my life. What was it? Here's some apple pie. Oh, and you're the greatest. How hard is that? How hard is it to say to someone, "You're great. You're wonderful. That was fabulous. You're amazing. I appreciate you." Our words are so, so powerful. And that, my friends, is the lesson that King Solomon teaches us when he tells us that death and life are in the hands of the tongue. We can kill someone's hopes. We can kill someone's dreams. We can kill someone's aspirations with one sentence. Make sure that we are part of those that don't, God forbid, give death with the hands of the tongue. We're the ones who actually give life. Thank you so much for joining. I'm looking forward to seeing all y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being with us, Rav Gav. I'd now like to welcome to the show local clean speech champion, Steve Brodsky. I remember many years hearing Steve play music at the Rose Hospital community Hanukkah parties for thousands of people. Thanks for being with us, Steve.
Hi, my name's Steve Brodsky, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this year's Clean Speech Colorado campaign. I'm honored to serve as the cantorial soloist and music director at Temple Emmanuel here in Denver. I work as part of the clergy team along with Rabbi Joe Black, Cantor Elizabeth Sachs, and Rabbi Emily Hyatt. But one of the favorite parts of my job is the work I do with our B'nai Mitzvah program. I teach our B'nai Mitzvah class along with Cantor Sachs, and I work closely with students and their families over the course of about 15 months leading up to their special celebration. I'm really excited that the theme for this second year of Clean Speech Colorado is Onas Devarim, the prohibition against saying anything that would pain, anger, hurt, frighten, or embarrass another person. Frankly, I didn't know all that much about the specific prohibitions of Onas Devarim, but as I did some research, it became really clear to me that this is part of what I do every day, working with young men and women who are preparing to become bar and bat mitzvah. Now, we all know that being a child at any age is never easy, but the preteen and early teen years can be really, really tough. The challenges of the COVID pandemic aside, being a teen in the age of social media can be just brutal. They are going through so many changes in their lives, physical, social, emotional, and for many, the added pressure of studying to become bar or bat mitzvah can be really overwhelming. So I try really hard to never embarrass a student in front of their classmates or their parents. Our tradition teaches that it is prohibited to give rebuke to another person if it cannot be done without embarrassing, insulting, or hurting their feelings. This can be tough when I have a student who has fallen behind or isn't putting in the time and effort that they need to learn their materials. So I work at keeping my rebukes gentle, at giving lots of encouragement and positive reinforcement, and always trying to find constructive and positive ways to help kids be successful and feel really great about what they are accomplishing. The Gemara also teaches that one may not embarrass another by asking him a question that he may not know the answer to. So it's a trick sometimes to push my students, to challenge them to remember something that we've already covered or to connect some dots that maybe they haven't before. And that is one of my greatest joys in teaching these kids, is seeing the light bulb go on over their head as they learn something new and make a connection to some other thing that they knew but maybe was buried somewhere in their brain and they've just dug it up. We work hard to create an environment in our B'nai Mitzvah program where kids feel comfortable, supported, and encouraged to ask any question, where we laugh a lot and enjoy the camaraderie of being together, and where we develop trust as we all work toward the common goal of finding joy and meaning in Jewish life. We model these behaviors and we model clean speech, and our kids thrive in this environment. And not always, but almost always, our kids support one another and speak to one another with words of kindness, friendship, and support. I'm Steve Brodsky, and I'm keeping it clean.
Thank you so much, Steve, for being with us on the show. I'm delighted now to introduce my co-host, Adrienne, and her interview with Lori Palatnik. Lori and I actually came to Denver at about the same time 18 years ago, and we got to know each other as educators in the community. She's gone on to do great things for the Jewish world, and we're delighted to have her as our special guest interview tonight.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Clean Speech Campaign. I'm, of course, your host, Adrienne Gold Davis, and I'm looking forward to exploring this fundamental principle for creating peaceful, respectful relationships. You know, Judaism has extremely high standards when it comes to the way that we talk. Our tradition teaches us that the world was created with speech and that words matter, and that words can both hurt and heal. So personally, many years ago, when I worked in television, I used to get countless letters. And in those days, faxes. Remember those? And the comments used to range from the passive aggressive to the downright cruel. And the common theme had very little to do with whatever content I was presenting that day and settled squarely on my appearance. Adrienne, people would write, we love you. We love watching you. You make it look like any average looking Jewish girl could have a TV show, or anyone like could be on television because you know you're not that pretty. Or Adrienne, you know you could do to lose 20 pounds. Don't you know that the TV adds weight? And oh, my favorite, Adrienne, you're not so pretty, but we love to watch you. I could go on and on and on. And in many ways, people really thought that their honesty was a way of bonding with me. It never occurred to them that each of those notes I received broke my heart, that I personally might have felt self-conscious about my less than movie star looks on camera. Now, I was raised properly. I didn't speak if I didn't have anything nice to say, but I had no idea whatsoever that so much of Jewish law and practice is devoted to assuring that we don't commit that dreadful act of onus devorim, or speaking hurtful words. The idea that words can hurt and that words can heal didn't elude me. It didn't. But what I didn't know was that a lot of things I took for granted as harmless were anything but. You know, a good session of dishing the dirt, well, what we call lashon hara in Hebrew, some kind of dramatic eye roll like this to get the attention of the camera, or, you know, an amused grin with a side eye, something like that. Anything, the body language, or the excuses. I was just kidding. It was just a joke, for heaven's sakes. Or I'd say it right to her face, or I really didn't mean to hurt anybody. I was kidding. It just doesn't cut it. And I didn't know that. And this, I might add, was long before the advent of social media. And who had any idea just how much damage we could do safely hiding behind our keyboards, obscured by those screens? So the spoken word, the written word aside, hurtful words are worse than sticks and stones. They do damage. And today, that damage can spread around the world in the blink of an eye. So way back in 2008, I received a friend invitation from the famous and fabulous Lori Palatnik. It was for Facebook. It was a site I'd heard about, but I hadn't joined it yet. And I remember feeling that rush of excitement. Lori Palatnik wants to be friends with me. And I couldn't accept her invitation because I hadn't joined Facebook. So of course I immediately joined Facebook. And that was the beginning of a relationship that's been enduring, but also exasperating, exciting, but also energy and time sapping. No, not my relationship with Lori, my relationship with Facebook. So Lori Palatnik is the founding director of Momentum, formerly called JWRP. She's a world-renowned Jewish educator, a speaker, a writer, a media personality, and she's lectured all over the world. And she's authored 4 books: Friday Night and Beyond, Gossip, Remember My Soul, and How to Turn Your Husband into Your Soulmate. And in 2014, Lori was named one of the 10 women to watch by Jewish Women International in recognition of her contribution to Jewish women throughout the world. Hadassah named Lori one of the most outstanding American Jewish women of our time. And Izzy included Lori in its global Jewish 100 list for moving Jewish culture forward. And in 2020, Lori was selected to light the diaspora torch at the national ceremony for Israel's 72nd Independence Day. And all of these accolades aside, she's still a human being with feelings. And we're going to talk to her about that. Welcome, Lori. Okay, so clearly my next guest is the queen, is the person to ask these questions to, because she literally wrote the book on this. Lori Palatnik wrote a book on gossip, which is, by the way, Lori, you should know, a sort of bedside Bible for me, given where I came from. And it continues to be probably my most frequently referenced book. So aside from the fact that you're an enormous influencer, and that people look to you for your opinions and your musings on things, it's also clear that people who are sort of keyboard warriors who hide behind their screens feel like they can have a go at anybody on social media. So I wanted to start by asking you, number one, what you feel your obligations and responsibilities are as an influencer, as a thought influencer, and then segue into how that whole game has been changed because of social media.
So first of all, it's so great to see you, Adrian. I miss you and I love you. Like we're old friends, and it's so wonderful that you're doing this series for everybody, especially during these times.
Yeah.
So I feel a little uncomfortable when people say, "Oh, you're an influencer." We're all influencers, all of us. There are people in our house who are watching us, who are looking at us, who are listening to us. And you think that it's not all going into their hard drive? It is. And some of these people are short people who look like us, as in our children. And you don't have to have 100,000 followers in order to be an influencer. You just have to have one. You just have to have one person looking at you.
Huh.
And when you put something, especially today, when you type something in, it's there forever.
Right.
As we tell our kids, like, people are like, be careful what you post, because when you apply for a job or you're applying for graduate school, they immediately go onto your social media.
Right.
So even after we're gone from this world, that's what's going to be left behind. What do you want to be known as? The person who has the flippant remark, the person who loses their temper in public. You know, we always say, think before you speak.
Right.
Pause before you post. You know, if you stop even for a second, what am I saying? Why am I saying it? And who am I saying it to? Pause before you post.
Oh, it's brilliant. But Lori, you know, sometimes a person, and you are an influencer, I know we are all influencers, you know, on the micro and the macro levels are different, but because you have so much impact, when you post, and one of the things I've noticed, especially over the last few weeks, is that you will post a fully innocuous, even-handed statement, and you will be jumped on. I mean, you have so many lovers. Everybody's in love with Lori Palatnik. And then, of course, when there are that many lovers, there are haters. How do you feel, even in your kind of controlled, mature, emotional maturity, how do you feel when people have a go at you online?
So first of all, let's define haters. What are haters? So if you look in the Urban Dictionary, hate, because people use this term now, haters are not jealous. Haters do not want to be you. Haters do not take any pleasure in anyone else's success. They don't want anybody else to have success and joy. That's a hater. Right. So where's that coming from? Why wouldn't a person want to see other people succeed? Because they're not feeling good about their own lives. Instead of hating back, really, in Judaism, we're supposed to feel sorry for a person like this. Right. You feel bad for them. This is not a happy person. A person who has to put somebody down in order to feel up, that's not coming from a person of strong self-esteem and security. I don't feel bad when people post negative things. I don't take it personally. Why? Because they don't know me. If my sister-in-law posted something like not so nice about me, I would feel bad. I would take it personally because it's personal. So when I post something, and obviously it touches somebody, and believe me, there were times at the beginning when I first started on this whole social media where I would just post something or repost something without giving it thought. And sometimes it was a mistake and I would take it down. Or it was a mistake because I saw that it wasn't worth it. If you're going to post something that's really going to bring out a lot of emotion and opinions in people, and there are times to do it, there are times we have to stand up for justice, but choose wisely. Don't post something that it's not worth it to bring in. And why is it going on, especially now? It's it's a pressure cooker now.
Right.
COVID. You have to give people a hall pass. People are not acting at their best now. You have to give the people in your house a hall pass. It doesn't mean they could do whatever they want, but people are under a lot of pressure. And when people have financial pressure or job insecurity or health issues and death and sickness and people have fears, of course that it just takes a spark and people will be set off. So there are times where I'll post something and I know there's going to be pushback, but there's something going on in the world and I need to take a stand. But I better think once, twice, and 3 times before I do it.
So the times you have taken things down, it was because you felt that the greater good was not being served. And you're telling me that you have such intact self-esteem, that I wish I was you, that those negative comments, unless they're from someone you know, don't kind of worm in even a little bit? Because that's what they...
I honestly, really, I don't take it personally. Have you ever been listen, you're a public speaker and I'm a public speaker. Are there times where somebody is upset at you or they'll send you or you find out that so of course you don't want to cause anybody pain, God forbid, but you know that wasn't your intent, but obviously you touched something. And there are times where it sparks something and I wanted it to spark something. I really try to stay away from politics. Why? Because politics divide. But I'm going to stand up for values. And if the values are about people want to hook something political to it. Can I tell you, half the people who follow me, they think I vote Democrat. Half the people who follow me are for sure thinking I vote Republican. That's good. They're not sure. Politics divide. And if you want to bring people together, they shouldn't know where you stand politically, but they should know where you stand in terms of values. Don't be quiet about your values. You can set the bar.
In fairness, Lori, in the last year or two, values and politics have become strange bedfellows, which in some ways is good because it means people are thinking about values, but they're attaching values to people as opposed to the overarching value itself. So how do you decide when you post something? What do you ask yourself to ensure that A, lashon hara, or evil speech, isn't happening, or you're not provoking it, and honest devorim, hurtful words, are not going to be provoked? Because my understanding is, from a Jewish perspective, you don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. You don't make it possible for a person to transgress those laws. How do you make your decision?
So first of all, I wouldn't post something that I wouldn't say at my Shabbat table. That if somebody was at my table, if I've had guests at my Friday night table, I would never post something that I wouldn't say to somebody at my table in front of other people. Because what people do is they post or they make remarks about things because they can hide, right? They're hiding behind all this Wi-Fi and their electronics. But if you wouldn't say it into the person's face, don't post it.
Okay, that's fair. But we also know, and I learned from your book, Gossip, that when you're speaking lashon hara, words that are evil, for example, it's not an excuse to say, I'd say it to her face. So where's the differentiation there?
So listen, if we want to talk about lashon hara, you have to define it. And you have to define, hurtful words. The definition of lashon hara is any form of communication that reflects negatively on someone unless there's a positive constructive purpose.
So that's the rub, right? That positive constructive purpose.
Exactly.
Okay, now what about honest devorim? How would you define it?
What is hurtful speech? It's when it's painful for them. Even if it's not painful for you, but if it's painful for them, it's hurtful speech. So sometimes in the laws of ethical speech, you can say something positive and it can be hurtful. So nobody gets up in the morning, I'm going to hurt my friend today. I'm going to cause pain to my coworker. Nobody does. People, your mother-in-law thinks she's being helpful by pointing out all your mistakes.
What I'm hearing from you is that in order to live up to our potential as speaking souls, We need to be thinking through the ramifications of everything that comes out of our mouth. We should be so exhausted at the end of the day that we pass out cold, even without that glass of wine. Good night. From so much exhaustion from doing the work. But what I'm hearing from you, and this may be part of what makes you so spectacular and why I feel so honored to interview you, is that you've internalized all of these things you've written about and you've studied. And you've taken this even one step further. And this is what I think is the most important. You're suggesting that we judge people favorably, and not just during pandemic times, but all the time, that we are to assume that they didn't get up deciding to cause us pain. Why do you think that people sometimes think that other people are trying to cause them pain?
Because it hurts. Because it hurts when somebody is doing something and you're feeling pain. You're not at your best. You're not in the space of to be able to look at the whole situation, to know that you're meeting somebody in chapter 3. There was chapter 1 and chapter 2, and there's going to be chapter 4 and chapter 5, but you're meeting them in the middle. And it's hard. It's hard when you're hurting. It's hard. Talmud says a person who causes somebody pain is blind. They can't see. They can't see. They really think they're being helpful. They really think they're being supportive. They really think that you want to know all of your mistakes. Somebody posted recently on Facebook a picture of this big empty warehouse. And they said, and the caption was, all the people who changed their minds because of what you posted on Facebook. Like, what are you doing? Do you really think on social media that people are going to? So sometimes I will post something or I will reply to somebody and disagree with them. I choose wisely, like to call them on something. Why am I doing it? Are they going to change their mind like that? My husband, he's a big sports fan. So I remember like watching baseball games with him and like, they make a call at home base and the umpire makes a call and the manager of the opposing team comes out screaming at him and they're screaming at each other. And I kept seeing that. I said, Jacob, why are they doing that? Not once does the umpire ever say, I never saw it that way, and switched his call. I said, why are they screaming? He says, because next time, maybe he'll hesitate to make that call.
Oh my.
So there are times that even if the person in front of you or the person online is not going to change their mind, but you have to say something because they're really saying something that's wrong. They may not say, gee, I never thought about it that way, and change the way they vote, they whatever it is. But maybe next time they'll hesitate. You're putting it in their hard drive.
Wow.
But choose wisely. Choose wisely.
So if you could share with the thousands of people who are listening to us now, if you could share your best practices and advice for functioning on social media, because of the times that we're in and because it's so much more intense these days, because we're all stuck behind a screen, give me 3 best practices that will help prevent us from speaking words or creating hurtful speech in our wake.
Okay, so first of all, before I post, I think about my kids before I say anything, because my kids are going to see what I post. Are they going to be proud or are they going to be ashamed?
Oh man.
And embarrassed, right? Like really, your kids are watching, your kids are reading. If I wouldn't say it on the stage and if I wouldn't say it at my Shabbat table, then why do I think writing it in such a pithy way is the right thing to do? But I'm going to give you the best tool. I want you to watch the movie Defending Your Life.
I loved that movie.
Okay, Meryl Streep, Albert Brooks. Clean movie, very cute movie. It's about people who die and go to the next world. And they start, they're going to decide where you go. Do you go to the good place or the not so great place? And you have a lawyer who's defending you and you have a prosecuting lawyer. And what is the prosecuting lawyer showing? Clips of your life. For years, people told me I should watch this movie because I speak about soul in the afterlife. So I watched it the other night. And I saw why they said so, because it's so much what the Torah says, that your actions don't just have consequences for now, but for eternity. So Albert Brooks they're showing clips of him growing up and saying that he's just so fearful, and he's a scaredy cat, and he just has no courage. And his defending lawyer is like, no, he's humble. And Albert Brooks like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm humble. That's what I am. I'm humble. They're going to show in the next world, like Stephen Covey in his book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits is begin with the end in mind.
Oh, nice.
He means the end. Begin with the end in mind. So in the next world, when they play back clips of your life, they're gonna show some of the things that you posted, the language you used. Did you use words are a gift? I try to use social media to build people up. I'm always like hearts and exclamation marks and you go girl. Like it's such an opportunity and such an easy way to build people, to make people feel good about themselves. There are times to call people on it. It doesn't have to be in front of everybody else. That's what private messaging is for. Do you ever been to a funeral and the rabbi says, and she never had a bad word to say about anybody in her life? Now, that's life. Are they going to be able to say that about us?
Lori, I want to say that when you're in the good place at 120 plus 3 days, I do hope you'll send a rope down to the not so good place for me.
Are you kidding? We're going to be dancing together, honey. Now, I want to tell you, the only reason that I wrote the book and the reason that I really work on this is because this is a challenge for me. You and I were given the gift of speech. It's a gift, and we have to use it wisely. So we use our words more than your average person, because that's what we do for a living. So we have to be more careful. And I know that it's happened to you, and I know it's happened to me, that I said the wrong thing, or that I was flippant, or that I was just joking, or I said something and I wasn't sensitive to that person, or I was too hard, or I wasn't hard enough. And because we're trying to help people. So I'm the first one, just like you and I are Canadian born, I'm the first one to say I'm sorry. Canadians are sorry about everything. I'll say I'm sorry. And the worst thing is when you've hurt somebody, but they don't come to you and you don't even know you hurt them. And I really hope and pray that people forgive me. My intentions are good, but I'm a person too. I make mistakes too.
Lori, this has been deeply enriching, humbling, useful, profound, just like you. Thank you.
Aw, I love you, Adrian.
I
You're the
love
best.
you, Palatnik. You really are an influencer in the true sense of the word. And you really have had such an incredible influence on the choices that I've made in the last 22 years. And I thank you for helping show me the way. Thank you, my love. It was an honor to
I
speak
love
to
you. You're the best. And really, Hashem should bless us that, he made this orifice that it can open and it can close. And there are times to open it and there are times to close. And if you ever wonder, is this the time to open it? Keep it closed, because you can always open it later. So once you see it, just try and take it back.
Unbelievable. Thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts.
Next up, I'm delighted to welcome to the show word-wise kid Julie Vida, who just celebrated her bat mitzvah yesterday. Welcome to the show, Julie.
To be accepted, it means to be treated the same as everyone else around us. Also, to be accepted means people don't look at your differences from them. They look at your similarities and they treat you equally. I think we don't accept other people because we are often being judgmental. When someone makes fun of me, I start to feel very sad about myself, or even getting a bit depressed. It also makes me feel lonely and lose interest in being active or doing things I usually enjoy. I will stop judging myself. If I stop putting pressure on myself to do the right way, I'll also stop putting pressure on others as well. Not judging myself or others is a crucial step to acceptance. I'm Julie, and I'm keeping it clean.
Today is the first day of week 3 of this year's Clean Speech Colorado campaign. The topics that we're going to deal with in this week have to do with the underlying causes of onas devarim. The words that we say ultimately are products of the emotions and the inner world each one of us has. And if we want to truly stop the flood of onas devarim, we need to think deeply about what's inside. If you haven't already done so, join us at cleanspeechcolorado.org and sign up so that you too can get these powerful lessons every day. Thanks so much for joining us on the talk show, and we'll see you next week.